Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, head of institutions, directors, eminent speakers from the industry, academia, media. We are really privileged that all of you are here. They say that in history, few days are really very, very important. And today is a very important day for us as we have one of the greatest leaders of industry and academics, Professor Martin Bean. Give a huge applause to him. Professor Martin Bean, if you search Google or if you search YouTube and you look at the speeches which he has been giving, I think some of the most powerful speeches of the decade have been given by Professor Martin Bean. He is today the Vice Chancellor and the President of RMIT, one of the leading universities of Australia, and previously he has held the position as a Vice Chancellor of one of the biggest universities of the world, the Open Universities, the UK's largest academic institution, which he reformed and re-engineered. A leader of the leader, in the previous role of the flexible learning, he was also the General Manager of the Microsoft Worldwide Education Product Group and held various executive top positions at Noida and other companies integrating technologies and learning systems. In 2012, Professor Martin launched one of the leading companies of the world, Future Learns, which has become today the benchmark of excellence and the UK's first at all scale provider of massive open online courses. And in 2014, he was named one of the UK's Prime Minister's business ambassadors. He won numerous awards in the US and in UK for his contribution to education and was awarded a Commander of the Order of British Empire in 2015 in the United Kingdom New Year's Honours List for the service to the higher education. Awarded as Honorary Doctorate of Law from the University of London in 2013, Martin has a Bachelor's of Education degree from the University of Technology, Sydney. Professor Bean worked at the top position in the companies, including Thomson Learning, New Horizon Computer Learning Center before joining Microsoft, where he led it as a general manager. He's on the board of trustees of British Council, the board of Commonwealth of Learning, and the board of the British Museum Digital Advisory Group. In addition, he has served as a member of the Workforce Training and Education Coordinating Board and the National Board of Directors of Job for America's Graduates, as well as advising the US Senate on the importance of IT in the Workforce Investment Act. One can see Professor Martin in some of the most distinguished international conferences. He only goes to the conferences where he finds that there is some substance as a keynote speaker. And we are really honored, sir, that he has accepted. Give a huge applause to our invitation to be the keynote speaker at Asia's largest international conference, INBUSH. He has specially flown from Australia for just few hours to be with all of you, and we really feel honored by your presence. And there are few people who make the things happen. We were in touch with RMIT, with whom we are launching commercial pilot program at Greater Noida campus. But Professor Martin, we was really impressed the way we were just there for 10 minutes and he said, the doctor saying, we will make it happen that from this April, at least there will be a partnership of 100 students which will be going from India to Australia and will be coming from Australia to India. Give a huge applause once again. Great leaders are always like that. When the CFO, the finance department and people are raising questions, they will always say that everything will flow, provided that the top people, they have the vision, and that is what the dream of this conference is. That if you've got a dream, if you've got a leader, and if you have got a person who has got some substance, they will make it happen. Listen to the leader of leaders, champion of human hearts, Professor Martin Bean. Over to you.
Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you, okay? Now, I am watching you. So I'm watching to see how many of you stray off and start using your weapons of mass distraction while I'm speaking today. And I can tell because your faces glow. I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm a teacher, so if I spot that glow, I will be coming to you for a question. So just be thinking about that. I am going to ask that we set the lights the way that we asked the lights to be. This is why you always rehearse. A little bit more. Very good, look at that. Now I can see that glow in your face. Much easier that way. Professor Singh, thank you for that amazing introduction. You know, it's pretty clear why I'm here. I'm here for 3 reasons. Number 1, relationships matter. And the leaders of Amity University are wonderful people. And I like doing business with wonderful people. Because life is too short to not do business with people that you can trust, and more importantly, that you enjoy their company. So that's number 1. Number 2 is quite simply, and I've been coming to India since the early 90s. I've had the great pleasure of running 4 separate organizations in India. So I feel like I've been on this journey with you of your development, watching the changes in your society, the changes in your people. And when I was working in the United Kingdom, and I had the great pleasure to spend a little bit of time with your government at senior levels, and I began to understand your vision and aspiration. And now where you see India has assumed its rightful place in the global world order, it's just so very clear to me that wonderful institutions like RMIT, it's not just a good thing to establish collaboration with India, it is an absolute economic imperative for us to do that. And so for everybody in the audience, particularly the young people that are here today, this is your time. This is your time. But I'll tell you, you're only going to be successful if you have the courage to think differently about your lives, about your career, about what it is to learn. So that's the 3rd reason that I'm here. Thank you, Professor. I think that tertiary education is trapped in yesterday's model. I wish I was starting a brand new university in Malaysia, because I would build it very differently than the 130-year-old university that I now run. But my speech today for many people in the room is going to be a little controversial, because I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you on a journey of acceleration. I'm going to take you on a journey that I believe reflects the world reality we live in, not for tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, but today. The world has already changed around us, but universities largely have remained the same. It's why I have so much admiration for Amity, because they're already looking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead. So if you'll forgive me, I'm going to take you on a little journey. I'm going to take you on a journey of disruption. I'm going to put a few provocations out there. Provocations for institutions, but perhaps more importantly, provocations for individuals. What do I as an individual need to do differently to achieve the goals that I have for myself, for my family, for my community, and for some of you in the room, for your nation and for the planet? And that might sound like lofty words, but I'll guarantee you, sitting amongst you right now are the leaders that will end up solving the problems or creating the opportunities for mankind. And unless we start leveraging all of the assets that we've created for ourselves in education, then we won't realise all that we can achieve. Before I begin, I want to pay due respect to a colleague of mine. His name is Michael Moe. He actually runs a private equity firm, a firm that invests called GSV Capital out of California. And their firm specialises pretty well, or one big arm of their firm specialises in the investment in technology as it relates to education. So I use technology and education as a bellwether of disruption. And the reason why I like what Michael has to say is I follow where the investment money is going. Because if you follow where the investment money is going, it's a pretty good indication that it's telling you where is the disruption going. And much of the material that I'm working on today I've worked with and used with Michael. And so before I began as an academic, I wanted to give due reference to the fact that I built a lot of my remarks on my kindred spirit here, Michael Moe. So I'm going to take you a long way back in history, a long way back. I just want you to start in 2010. I want you to pause for a moment and just think about where you were in 2010. Just try to imagine one memory, if you can, of where you were in 2010. Right? See if you can conjure that memory up. Okay, now I'm going to take you back to 2010 and just show you how much the world has changed in such a short period of time. President Obama, he was just being sworn in. Many of us would say we wish he was still in the White House, but it was just at the very beginning. Lehman Brothers, right? It was still up and running, and it was just going through its collapse. The iPad was only released in April in 2010. Think about that. There was no tablet. Well, we had one in Microsoft, but it was pretty awful. But there was no tablet the way we know it in 2010. The first Uber ride was still 2 months away, and Uber hadn't even begun yet. Snapchat didn't start until July 2011, and today there are 10 billion videos per day exchanged in Snapchat. We think about Airbnb, now the largest hotel chain on the planet. They had just got their first round of funding. They were just a glimmer in the eye of a couple of entrepreneurs. They were just getting started. And today, in 2017, 100+ million nights booked through Airbnb. The titans in those industries, in the blink of an eye, toppled through disruption. And if you look at the investment, if you look at the investment in educational technology, the thing that I've done since I was a student, I've always worked in the intersection between technology and education. In 2010, there was about $550 million invested in educational technology. In 2015, there was $2.1 billion invested, and it's accelerated even more in the last couple of years at about a 31% compound average growth rate. Some of you will know of a company called Coursera. They were my arch enemy in 2012. Coursera was launched, and suddenly the best universities in America were giving away their courses for free. And as Professor Singh mentioned, that's when I launched FutureLearn for Britain, because I wasn't going to let the Americans have it all their way. I wanted to sort of do it for... And if you want to go online and just look at futurelearn.com, look at the fact that now they have millions and millions and millions of students all around the world studying not only in Britain's best universities now, but increasingly universities from around the world for free. For free. And why did we do it? Well, first of all, we did it because the minister got off an aeroplane, having just been in Silicon Valley, and called me and said, Martin, we've got to do something about this. But more importantly, I've learned that when you see disruption happen, you've got to suspend all of those prejudices and reasons why you shouldn't get involved, and all of the risk and everything else, all of the demons that hold back people in their ability to innovate and thrive. And sometimes, folks, you just got to go and get it done. And if you think about it, if you just look at Coursera alone, they now have over 18 million students. 18 million. And my goal when I started FutureLearn was not to be as big as Coursera, but to be better. So they might have 18 million students, but if you look at who wins all the awards for the quality education experiences, you'll notice that FutureLearn does it better, rather than bigger, from my opinion. So I'm very proud of that legacy that I've built. But look at these MOOC enrollments, folks. This is why I took the risk. This is why my colleagues in my university and other universities in Britain were willing to go all in. In 2012, really, is when it all kicked off. Stanford had done a little bit in 2011, but it really kicked off in 2012. And in 2012, overnight, 1.5 million students started studying small micro-subjects for free from some of the world's best universities. And something also really interesting started happening then, employers started really valuing those students who had studied those modules. But look at that growth rate. 225% compound average growth rate of people studying in that free, open environment. Human beings don't do that unless they see value in doing it. And so I am just so glad that I was able to suspend that judgment, wrestle my demons to the ground, take a risk, bring others with me. If you look at what the conference is about, it was the dreaming, it was the daring, it was the figuring out, and it took those early stages. Later on, we figured out how to build the business models and how to deliver all the other words that we've got in the conference slogan here up on the screen, but it took that ability to dream and take risks to really get it going. And I think there's a lesson for all of our students in that. Now, I want to talk to you about computing, because at the same time, when I first started working with computers in education, the biggest barrier was cost. Whenever I'd walk into a school and I'd talk about computers, the biggest barrier was cost. Then the next big barrier that came along was connection to the internet. Right? And then those would be all the excuses why not to connect. But look what's been going on with computing. In 1994, the cost of computing was about $93, and now today it's a 99% decline to about 3 US cents. So great, that barrier is removed. If you look at the cost of storage, back in 1994, to store 1 gigabyte in 1994 cost about 173 US dollars. Again, a 99% decline. Today, a gigabyte of storage costs about 2 cents, which is why Google and Microsoft and Amazon and others, they're very willing to give all of you in the audience that free storage because the cost is so low. If you take a look at internet access, in the year 2000, there were about 371 million people getting access to the internet. Today, there's about 3.8 billion people getting access to the internet. Broadband access, 2000, about 60 million. Today, 2.3 billion people have access to broadband. I noticed that Sprint in the United States is just about to roll out a 5G network to their mobile users. Once 5G rolls, the whole idea of ever having to plug into a router in the room is going to sound very obsolete indeed. And of course, PC penetration. When I first started working in 2000, there was about 180 million. I actually went way before that. And today there's about 1.4 billion. And that's just PCs, which for many of the people in the room, you don't even use anymore. And that brings us to mobile. Just this unbelievable phenomenon we've seen with mobile computing. In 2000, there were about 740 million smart devices, mobile devices. Today, 7 billion. You literally cannot go anywhere on the planet, and I know, because I've worked just about everywhere on the planet, without there being a smart device showing up in one way, shape, or form. And if you think about it, just think about this for a moment. In the year 2000, there were 0 smartphones. None. Some of you remember those Nokia Java feature phones we used to use? Remember those? They still sell a lot of those, by the way, but they cost probably about $3 now. But there was 0, which means, folks, and today, of course, there's about 2.6 billion smartphones around the world. Similarly, this is the one that every time I deliver this presentation, I find it hard to believe. But folks, in the year 2000, the turn of the century, there was 0 app downloads to mobile devices. Just think about how much of your daily life now revolves around using an app on some type of mobile device. I notice a few people are stroking them right now as I speak. I hope I've got his attention. He's now very worried. I promise I won't stir. All right, so if we carry on. Today, app downloads, look at this number, folks. 258 billion app downloads today. That's a staggering number. Absolutely staggering. We recently launched at RMIT a program with Apple on their Swift iOS programming language that we're delivering through RMIT Online. We launched that in Melbourne just a few weeks ago in the latter part of the year. And the demand we've had for that micro-credential is explosive. Why? Because there is a lot of careers being made in those app downloads. So the moral of the story is that shift happens. Shift happens. It's hard to imagine what it was like for all of us now in 1999 when you look at just how much disruption is going on. But folks, it is only just beginning again. Has anybody here already got themselves a Google Home device in their home? Has anybody got one yet? I've got an Amazon Alexa artificial intelligence device in my home. Apple will get one out in just a few months' time. It's like another member of my family now. In fact, I enjoy talking to Alexa more in my kitchen than I do with one of my children, but that's a different story. But this whole generation of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, machine learning, or what I like to think of as the natural user interface that people have with technology is going to create just as much disruption, just as much displacement, just as much challenge and opportunity as all of the things that I've talked about since the year 2000. In fact, I predict that in about 10 years from now, if you're born now, and if you're about 10 years from now, you'll be with your parents and you'll be confounded about why you ever had to touch the device to make it do something. In the same way when I try to describe to my children what a fax machine was, they find it very difficult to comprehend what a fax machine was in my generation. So this quote from Paul, I think, is really quite prescient to us now, and we all need to be thinking about it. We could be looking at a society in which all the gains in wealth accrue to whoever owns the robots. And what Paul's really saying there is the rise of AI and robotics is going to forevermore change the world of work. Forevermore change the world of work. And it will change it at an accelerated pace here in India. Mark my words. You can already see it. Look into modern manufacturing in India right now, you will see an incredible amount of automation being deployed as fast as those organisations can deploy it. And it's quickly moving into professional services, law firms, accounting firms, ad agencies, marketing firms are all busily figuring out how to use artificial intelligence to replace jobs. Because, ladies and gentlemen, whether we like it or not, approximately 50% of the jobs as we know them today are at risk of replacement in the next 20 years. And let me just give you the reason, sort of why I think that's going to happen. Because it's all about knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? So the more computing starts to mimic knowledge, skills, and abilities, the more I think this is what's going to happen. You can see human beings and sort of their rates of development. Pretty predictable, had quite a long time to track and measure us. We know the rate that we pretty well develop. But what you're seeing now is that upswing of what's going on with computing technology, and I think that arrow there is about where we are right now. So where we are right now is that there's still a little clicky. Some of you might have tried to use Siri on a consistent basis. You know, Siri works great sometimes, doesn't work so well other times. But trust me, they are busily working on the back end to figure all of that out, and once they get it right, that development curve is going to grow very, very quickly. So the moral of the story, whether we like it or not, is that automation eats jobs. Automation eats jobs. Now, I believe as a Vice Chancellor and President that my university exists, and I'm deliberately talking about learning and teaching here, not research. My university exists to get our students ready for life and work. That's what I believe RMIT is there for, to get our students ready for life and for work. So if automation is eating jobs, then it changes what we need to do to get our students ready for life and work. And not just for the disruption that might happen tomorrow or the next day, but the disruption that is happening right now. And I can give you some examples of where you see it in other industries. If you compare AT&T over time and Facebook, well, it's pretty clear in terms of value creation what's gone on. In travel and hospitality, compare traditional hotel chains to what Airbnb does, and you can see the disruption that has taken place. If you look at energy, and you sort of look at ExxonMobil versus Selexor, you can see in terms of value the disruption that has happened over time. And yet if you look at education innovation, we really have stood still. And I know this is probably a little bit controversial. Amity is doing better than most. But my university included, we have not embraced disruption and technology the way other sectors have. And that's a very, very dangerous place to be, because our time will run out. Our time will run out. I think we are at our Uber moment. That's where I think we are. I think we're at that moment where we are the taxi company. We've been running it this way for a long time. We enjoy running it this way. We think our consumers love us, that they'll always want to purchase this way, that there's real value in the way our taxi company runs. But almost overnight, transportation, ground transportation, was reinvented. And it's been reinvented in the most unbelievably flexible ways. I was in Vietnam earlier in the week. I'm here in India. I'm seeing Uber on the back, and bicycle helmets, and jackets, and tuk-tuks, and all sorts of things, just to see how flexible these new entrants can be to meet market demands. But I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried at all, because this gap for us, this gap from where higher education is today versus the opportunity, that gets me so excited. It gets me so incredibly excited, because I'm in the business of education. It's what I do. And so for me, always being about technology and education, it just gets me so darn excited to close that gap. But you know why it gets me excited? It doesn't get me excited to make money. It gets me excited to get our students ready for life and work. That's why it gets me excited, because there's absolutely no point educating somebody to go out into the big wide world that has been disrupted and embrace technology in amazing ways if their education was a 20th century education. In fact, you could argue we've wasted their time. We've held them back. We've made it more difficult for them to get ahead. So that's why I want to close that gap. Some years ago when I was working in Microsoft, I was at a conference like this one, and a 12-year-old boy came up to me and said, "You know what, Martin? Going to school is like getting on an aeroplane." And I looked at him and I said, "Mark, that's a rather interesting observation. Why?" Well, he said, "You have to put all your trust and confidence in somebody at the front that you don't really know, and you have to turn off all your electronic devices." And I thought, what a wonderful way for that young man to sort of just express his frustration with what went on in his life and then what went on in his classroom. So I get really excited about closing this gap. And you know, one thing that I'm studying a lot about right now is virtual and augmented reality. I think the application for education is just extraordinary, and the cost is so low. You can get Google Cardboard on your face for like cents if you want to. You take that device you've already got, you load the app, you slip it in the cardboard, you put it to your face, and suddenly a world is opened up to you like never before. And if you think about it, the power of that for education is extraordinary. So why do I like this photo? Well, I like this photo because you'll notice they're still in a pretty traditional gymnasium. Not a fancy physical space, just a gym with seats and basketball courts. But that space with human beings side by side is now bringing to life experiences for people not in isolation but together, to share, to be inspired, to dare, to dream, to be challenged. And we're just at the very, very beginning of what that can do. And if you're still not trusting me, remember Pokemon Go? Remember Pokemon Go? All right. 500 million downloads, and the fastest game to reach $500 million in revenue ever. And it was augmented reality. It was the world suddenly en masse getting to experience augmented reality. But for the business people in the room, look what happened. The Pokemon craze lifted Nintendo past Sony by value. One game suddenly transformed Nintendo, and their value exceeded the almighty Sony Corporation. And I believe if you look on and see what's happened to Nintendo since, with the Switch platform, their ability to migrate from the legacy Wii platform to the Switch platform, if it hadn't been for embracing Pokemon Go, they probably never would have been able to innovate and transform themselves into the next generation of game technology. So today, in 2014, augmented and virtual reality industry was worth about $90 million. In 2018, in 4 years, it's now worth $5.2 billion. And for the first time, ladies and gentlemen, most technologies, education is about the last industry to adopt them. But I think with augmented and virtual reality, education is going to be one of the first industries to adopt it, and it can work in every field. We have radiography students now working with headsets on, with real equipment, being able to practice their skills on virtual reality patients, immersed in what for them feels like an absolutely normal environment. They're holding the machine's controller, they're standing in an open space, but they're now suddenly transformed into a medical facility working with a real patient. And when you stand there and you strap those goggles on and you realise that you'd much prefer that they practiced in virtual reality before they practiced on you, it's a very good thing indeed. So let me talk about all of that now as it relates to education. Sort of my punchline. This is the old system of education. I'm 53. This was my system. I'm not quite a baby boomer, I'm just after a baby boomer, but we got lucky. My generation, we got lucky. I sometimes worry for all of you that have to deal with the problems we left you. That's part of, sadly, the legacy we leave you. But luckily for the students in the room, you're smarter than we were, you're more diligent than we were, you take risks better than we did, and unlike my generation that just wanted to take, you wake up in the morning wanting to solve these problems and create a better world. That's why I have great hope. But my generation, this is the way we did it. 0 to 5, we got to play. That's what we did. From 5 to 25, that was the bit in our life where we said you had to learn. But then, from 25 to 65, and then you got to retire again, and I could put play after that again. Because that's what I'm going to do in my retirement. Because I'm going to go right back to being a child, and I've kept a spreadsheet so my children have to pay it all back to me in my retirement. But that was a pretty predictable world. And it used to be that we could go find a nice company to work for or a government department. Maybe people like me might move around a few companies, but my job would stay relatively similar. But the new system goes play, school, job, and learning for the rest of your life. And those of you in the room, not just the students, but my professional colleagues as well, if you do not embrace that concept, if you do not think about a world where if you stand still in 5 to 10 years, you can be a dinosaur, guess what? You will. And you'll suddenly wake up one day and you'll wonder, why is the world run by you? And I've got to tell you, the Americans have an expression, playing catch-up football. It is much more difficult playing catch-up football than staying in the game the whole way through. And so, I mentioned this yesterday in a wonderful panel that we were on. All the evidence says that somebody in tertiary education today is going to have 15 lifetime careers. Not jobs, folks, careers. That's absolutely a different career 5 to 15 times in their life. I checked mine out. I went back through my resume. I think in my life I had probably 3 what I would call real career changes in my life. And I'm pretty unusual in terms of the way that I've run my life. And the skills that are being demanded for that, what Professor Singh yesterday referred to as soft skills, are these things. Grit, critical thinking, problem solving, etc. As you move around the wheel there, you can see them. And the reason why I was so absolute on the panel yesterday, and there's lots of models for this. Probably the one I like the most is the model from the OECD on their 21st century competencies. If you want to go pick one, RMIT is basing ourselves on the OECD framework. But the reason why, folks, these competencies, these skills, are so important is because they're enduring. They're enduring. So I'll make some older people laugh in the room. I used to use DOS. I was really good at DOS. I was a ninja at DOS. But lo and behold, I woke up one day and DOS was gone. Nobody, this was disk operating system from Microsoft that started the first Microsoft PCs. But I've been communicating on stage in front of people since I was 10. Now I'll ask you at the end to critique me, but I reckon what I learned from the age of 10 in my ability to communicate has been that constant in my career through all of that change, and I've had to let go of some skills along the way. I worked in the publishing industry for a little while. Oh, thank you. And I knew how to develop film. I knew how to sit in a dark room and actually develop film that came out of a camera. And then I knew how to edit it to put in a magazine. I can go through all sorts of examples. But the one thing that I know is if we develop these competencies in our lives, and for those of us in education, if we nurture and grow these competencies whilst they're studying, I'm not saying you don't need your discipline. Of course you need your discipline. But you need to also recognise that you're going to have to grow that discipline knowledge through your whole life. These, on the other hand, will stay with you much longer through all the disruption. We need to start thinking of knowledge as a currency. And trust me, the world is. Any of you LinkedIn users? Any of you use LinkedIn? What's the value of LinkedIn to an employer? LinkedIn is a marketplace. It's a marketplace of knowledge and skills. That's what it is. It's certainly a great place to find people and connect with them for networks. But the underlying business model of LinkedIn is that it's a marketplace of skills and competencies. And when I was recently with LinkedIn, they told me that somebody in LinkedIn with their profile who has a non-credit bearing micro-credential from a Coursera or a FutureLearn or from Accenture, or from Walmart or Starbucks, is searched in LinkedIn 11 times more than somebody with a bachelor's degree. And for those of us that run universities, we need to pay attention to that. We don't spend enough time looking at the demand side. What is society demanding from education? What is the world of work demanding from education? What are our students demanding from education? And if we don't innovate, if we don't understand that knowledge is actually a currency and there's new marketplaces being developed and there's new models for the exchange of that currency, and the currency isn't just the degree or the master's or the PhD, that it's all breaking up and there's all of these micro units of currency, that in an ideal world we connect and we allow them to be connected because we want our students to be able to do some here, some here, some here, and be relevant in life. It's why I'm so proud of Amity. In the core DNA of Amity is an understanding that simply just having an education here at Noida does your students a complete disservice, and you know it. So what have you done? You've opened the world to your students. And that makes this education an incredibly powerful education for your students, your graduates, and your partners. But it's just one example of what we've got to do now to think about education being a lot more flexible. So let me talk about that a little bit. On the one end of the spectrum, and this is when the internet became aware. So when the internet first came along, it'd be fair to say that Google transforms the way we thought about information. Most of you right now, in fact I wouldn't mind betting all of you right now, have a weapon of mass distraction that is capable of accessing almost the entire sum of human knowledge. So information retrieval, not really a very valuable skill now, is it? When you can now type in a search, or if you've got an AI device, simply ask your AI device a question. Information, but you know what? Hats off to Google. Hats off to Google. They created a phenomenon, actually probably a life-changing moment for all of us in our ability to access information. And by the way, that became the most powerful form of democratizing education everywhere in the world. So I'm all about access. I'm all about how can you use technology to lower the price and get people more access to quality education, because it's the one thing in life, along with healthcare, that helps you realise your dreams. At the other end of the spectrum, of course, that's Harvard's crest. We had the traditional university, and they historically had all been about knowledge. They've been about knowledge, which is very different from information. If you're teaching well, your goal should not be rote memorization and regurgitation. It should be challenge, debate, deep learning, that equals knowledge. Knowledge that you can apply, which is why those softer skills, those 21st century competencies are so important, because the ability to find it in a book, rote memorize it and regurgitate it, which is where sadly a lot of exams are still, that skill is not valuable in the workplace. It might be valuable for you to get a good grade, it will not be valuable to you in the workplace. But folks, look at what's going on now, because this is what's going on now. The world has got really messy. People are acquiring their learning and their qualifications in all sorts of different ways. And they're just some of the brands that I could have put up there to illustrate the way that people have bridged information and knowledge. And the fact that it's growing at the rate that it is, the fact that employers are valuing the acquisition of knowledge in those different forms, is the provocation for us in tertiary education not to stand still. Unlike some who said in 2012, the university is dead. I've never believed that, never will believe that. But for universities to be relevant, we have to understand that continuum now. That continuum from information and knowledge. Because the old knowledge currency was the diploma. Still very proud of mine. Hangs on my wall. I love the fact that my signature is on a whole bunch of them every year now as well. And that was the old currency. The new currency, folks, is the diploma plus all of the other things that you will study, you will curate, you will bring to life for yourself in terms of who you are as a human being, and you need to keep adding those every year. And I think what I'm really looking forward to is when an alumni from RMIT doesn't think their relationship with me stops when I hand them their degree. They actually know that they're welcome back anytime in digital spaces to get the little bits they need more of to move through their career. And we're always open and we're always there for them. And sometimes it will be for free and sometimes it will be for fee, but they shouldn't need to go anywhere except their university to remain relevant for the rest of their lives. And that leads us to the rise of the micro-credentials. That's probably, I predicted it in 2012. It's probably one of the few predictions I had that came true. But I knew the real phenomena of the MOOCs would not be that the training or education was being given away for free. That wasn't going to be the disruption. The real disruption was going to be the breaking down of education into smaller, bite-sized, relevant pieces of learning that once we started putting a digital badge or a micro-credential on it, which meant that employers and industry could find it, that's where the real disruption was going to be. And that's where in 2012, you can go back on YouTube and finally say it. But that's what I said the great disruption would be at the barrier between the non-credit bearing and the credit bearing. And that's where the disruption is happening right now. And what I'm really proud of, actually, is that it's not just happening at sort of courageous universities like Amity and RMIT. This initiative was launched, I think it was very early last year, or just before, by edX. Now, edX is a joint venture between Harvard and MIT. It's another MOOC platform. I love working with the edX folks because, like FutureLearn, they were all about really democratization of education, opening education up. In edX today, you've got 950 courses, you've got 90 global partners, 840,000 certificates are available, and they've got over 2,300 faculty and staff that are teaching through their various programs. So good, sort of what Coursera has done, sort of what FutureLearn has done, but then they did something really interesting. They actually started their micro-masters program. And because this is my field of scholarship, I watch it very closely. But when they launched in September 2016, this platform is open to anyone. has 14 of some of the most prestigious university partners in the world. All the courses are master's level courses, and it bridges the knowledge gap between higher education and the workplace, so they're all focused on workplace demand. It uses all sorts of techniques for deep learning, but what's really interesting is you can go to any of those partners and do any of those micro-masters programs, and the other partners will recognise them like Lego blocks, and you can carry that credit inside the master's program and finish off to get your master's degree. That is wildly disruptive, and it's only just begun. It's why what Amity is doing by working with universities like mine to allow that free flow of learning between the institutions. And today that is still fairly stuck in traditional models. Of course it is. That's the world we live in, but mark my words, that my 14-year-old, when she thinks about going to university, probably won't think about just one institution for her undergraduate degree, probably will have already completed 2 or 3 modules while she was in high school, so that she's got them already under the belt, probably things that she loved to do. She'll be able to go to a university that will say, yeah, I'll take that advanced placement, and then we'll maybe sign up with the university as her core university, but that university is very open-minded. So if all of a sudden Georgie, my middle daughter, says, and for this unit, I'd like to do that from Amity, please, that university will be courageous enough to say, yeah, you go do that, and do it digitally, and we'll recognise it. That's where the world has to get to. So it's also a world, ladies and gentlemen, where we have to realise, I talked about LinkedIn before, that there are these big marketplaces now of knowledge and skills. And that's where also a lot of the disruption is happening. Because if people know that they're going to be able to get a job much easier by building a portfolio of their education that industry recognises, and if industry starts to figure out that it's much easier to be able to go into a marketplace and find people, not based on their degree or where they studied, but based on the competencies that they've demonstrated, the marketplace is going to shift very, very rapidly. And I think when you saw LinkedIn by lynda.com, which is a massive repository of learning content, and now you see Microsoft having bought LinkedIn, who are one of the world's leaders in artificial intelligence, global storage distribution, and productivity tools, it's not a big leap, is it, to understand what their vision might be for further and higher education versus the incumbents, versus those of us that are perpetuating a 20th century model, which is why, again, I believe it's so important we work with all of these things that you see surrounding this to build a more contemporary education. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute privilege to have spent some time with you today. Thank you very much.